Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rails 54th Radical Poetry Reading. I'm Nick Bennett, the Special Projects Editor here at the Rail, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming poet Rajiv Mohabir, who has lovingly curated a fantastic lineup of poets and readers for us today, featuring Desiree C Bailey, Aruni Kashyap, and Cynthia Dewi Oka. Here at the Rail, we have two important acknowledgements to start all of our events. The first is that here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. The second is an acknowledgement that Black Lives Matter. The heart of both of these acknowledgements is a commitment to the liberation of the oppressed and solidarity for all who struggle for freedom, and recognition that when it comes to liberation, our histories never unfold in isolation, as said by the great Angela Davis. In that spirit, I encourage you all to check the chat for a living document of resources and actions that will be posted in just a moment. But now to introduce today's curator, Indo-Caribbean American poet Rajiv Mahaphir is the author of 3 acclaimed poetry collections, including The Taxidermist's Cut from 2016, The Cowherd's Son from 2017, and most recently published this month by 4-Way Books, Cutlish. He's the author of a book of translations, I Even Regret Night from 2019, and a hybrid memoir, Antiman, published just this year. He is the winner of the 2015 Kundiman Prize, a 2015 Heim Translation Fund Grant, a finalist for the 2017 Lambda Literary Award in Gay Poetry, and has received fellowships from Kundiman, the Home School, and the American Institute of Indian Studies. He holds an MFA in Poetry and Translation from Queen's College and his PhD in English from the University of Hawaii. He is currently a professor at Emerson College, and without further ado, Rajiv, handing the mic over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you to everybody at Brooklyn Rail. I'm so excited to be reading with these folks today. When I was asked to pick some folks who are working in contemporary poetry around the theme of radical poetry, these are people who came to my mind almost immediately. Aruni Kashyap, speaking his book of poems that has just come out. Oh yeah, and that's another thing I should say, that these are folks with books that have just come out, as well as a book that's forthcoming in November. And so I'm really excited by the newness of these poems, but then also by the critical stakes that each lends, whether they're critical and poetic at heart, and the conflations of these things. We can't ever really ignore the interaction between content and form, whether they're the persona poems of, that Aruni has labored over elucidating an impossible subject of people from the northeast of India, or whether it is the voice of the ocean that is at the banks of the page in Desiree C Bailey's collection, or if it is writing poems from the heart of an activist, affecting change in our world today, as Cynthia Dewi Oka does, in her poetry, but then also her work that connects people and communities. I thought that it would be such an honor to be among these voices. So I hope you share with me this enthusiasm for their wonderful collections of poems, as well as their beautiful hearts.
Well, thank you so much, Rajiv, for that beautiful introduction. Now we'll get right into the reading. So I have the pleasure of introducing our first reader of the day. Writer and translator Aruni Kashyap is the author of His Father's Disease from 2019, and translated from Assamese and introduced celebrated Indian writer Indira Goswami's last work of fiction, The Bronze Sword of Tengpakri Tasadar from 2013. He won the Charles Wallace India Trust Scholarship for Creative Writing to the University of Edinburgh, and his poetry collection, There is No Good Time for Bad News, published just this year, was a finalist for the 2018 Marsh Hawk Press Poetry Prize and 2018 4-Way Books Levi's Award in Poetry. His short stories, poems, and essays have appeared in the Boston Review, the Oxford Anthology of Writings from the Northeast, the New York Times, The Guardian, and others. Aruni, over to you.
Thank you everyone. It is an absolute honor to be here. And I actually call myself an accidental poet. So I'm very pleased and very honored that Rajiv chose me to be here. Um, it was around my undergraduate days when the great Indian writer Indira Goswami, who I would become her translator eventually, she inspired generations of writers, mostly women. She wrote about women's issues in Assamese, and she was an internationally known writer from my state. And wrote in my language, Assamese. She nudged me to write poetry, and she just thought that I would become a good poet. And she pushed me one day to write poetry, and in fact called an editor and said, Aruni will send you a poem. And I was forced to write poetry, and for some reason I have never stopped. So I think it's a gift and a blessing from her. But I never took any workshop in poetry. I never know the rules and regulations of poetry. I read a lot of poetry in my first language, which is Assamese, and a lot of oral indigenous poetry that I'm used to knowing because I've listened to them. So those are the inspirations for me. But at the same time, I have been sort of deeply influenced by African poets, by Latin American poets like Neruda, and so on, and indigenous American poets, African American poets. So these are the voices probably you would see in my work. So I'm going to read a couple of poems, and my poems are actually stories. And I often actually write, I'm a fiction writer, I'm a storyteller. My poems are also stories. This is about my grandmother telling me about one of the biggest earthquakes that happened in the world, and definitely in India. It was 8.9 at the Richter scale. So this is my grandmother telling me. My grandmother tells me about the earthquake of 1950. First, it was just the ants. Like water bubbles, blood that oozes out of a wound, they emerge from their holes carrying grains of rice. We thought it was because of the impatient slanting rains that must have percolated, flooded their bedrooms, dining rooms, living rooms. But soon, even though it wasn't a season of fleeing birds, the birds left their nests. Angry crows flew from one tree to another as if one of their own had been killed. But they just cawed like frightened people. They didn't try to claw on our cheeks, pierce our eyes, as if they were trying to tell us the secret knowledge of the ants, alert us, as they always did, about uninvited guests. One evening, the wild ducks, the sparrows, the kingfishers, the woodpeckers left noisily. Empty nests with eggs, nude beehives that hung from the large branches, dripping golden honey in the sun, forming puddles below with no ants to drown in sticky sweetness. It was then we knew something was coming, though we didn't expect it would be the river, because we had come to this village fleeing the furies of another river that attacked paddy fields, houses, and swept away brothers, sisters, mothers, lovers, concubines on the day it came, August 15, 1950. We were planning to gather at the school playground to sing the anthem, distribute sweets. But I fell down while tying a bun. And I thought a decoy had entered, pushed me to take away my gold necklace. I couldn't stand up, and the rattling walls told me to crawl out, screaming for your grandfather. The courtyard was slimy, with thousands of earthworms germinating from the soft soil, while water from the hot springs that had sprouted in our courtyard burned my cheeks. One of my legs stuck in a deep crack. When the trees shook their heads, we didn't know about the newborn river that had sprouted from the chest of a nearby mountain. We didn't know it was 1 million times stronger than a bomb called Fat Man. We didn't know that the creator of Fat Man and Little Boy had looked at the test explosion and recited a chant from the Gita. Now I'm become death, the destroyer of worlds. Even without you, every warrior in the enemy camp will cease to be. But the ants and the birds and the howling dogs and foxes knew. So they left, so they howled, barked. Thank you. The second poem actually is an ode to Ezra Pound's poem, The River Merchant's Wife, A Letter. And that poem also has an homage in Assamese language by the poet Heim Borua, who was a modernist poet who wrote in the style of T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound. But I'm writing this poem much later in around the 2000s. And this is about a mother who is writing this poem. It's an epistolary poem, and she's writing this to her son who has joined the anti-India insurgency organization in Assam, which has basically ravaged my state for a very long time, since the 1980s and the 1990s. And I grew up in the middle of this violence. And I knew many people, my aunts, my friends, parents, and many people who had suffered very deeply in the insurgency. So she's talking to her son through this letter. The militant's mother, a letter. Mormor Baba, here I have just lit the candle to write to you after a very long time. Mormor Baba, we had so many hopes heaped on you. You will do well, ace the exams, go to Cotton College to study, become an Indian administrative officer, and return home with cars with red lights and sirens that would wake the village from stupor. Your father startles at night. He hasn't forgotten how the officer asked him to frog jump in front of his students for raising you, hasn't forgotten how he wasn't allowed to wear his dhoti. After it slipped down, he frog jumped 40 times in his underwear, one end of the field to the other until he reached the silk cotton tree. And when the women moved their faces and his students looked down at their own feet, the officer shot a dog and screamed, look at him, look at him. But Baba, if you come once, he would forget that pain. He would move his hands over your soft hair and say, Ahili, what will you eat? What will you eat, Baba? Baba will love you, don't doubt it. We know that you have read more books, have thought about the world more than us. But I want to see you once more. I want to know if you're eating well, if you have lost weight. Please come once again so that I can look at your face to say, Ahili, I will serve your favorite payo with lots of cinnamon. I'll cook your favorite fish tenga with fewer green chilies. Don't avoid visiting us, do come. Even if someone informs the officer, we want to hear. Your aunt hung herself from a large jackfruit tree after the officer touched her, Baba. Your brother left for the city after they hammered sharp pins in his fingertips because he couldn't tell them where you live. What is your next plan? Remember the silk cotton tree at the end of the village? Last month, a strong bolt of lightning burned it down. Now it is covered by a yellow parasitic plant. The village elders say it is not a good sign. I'm worried it means it would take longer for you to come. Remember the dog that was shot dead? I have adopted her 2 puppies, now 7 years old. They guard our house. They don't know how their mother was killed. Only I know. Only your father knows. Only the village knows. But the river that carries the reflection of the sky, it knows everything, including how your father, who stares at the skies most of the day, feels. Postscript. Baba, please come. Send news with the milkman or the fish seller like you usually do. When the fish seller brings a bunch of boreal fish and suggests cooking it with mustard, I know what he means. I promise you, when you are coming down from the Tamilidobha River, I will walk up to its bank to receive you as far as Kuramora, where the horse died. The next poem is actually a sort of a fabulous or a folk poem, in the sense that I use a lot of folk tales and folk motifs in order to write this poem. And I also think that we should try, all of us, to become better ancestors. What we do today is going to change the world tomorrow and beyond. So to be better ancestors, I think we also need to focus on stories that are of hope and survival. And I think the 4 stories that we focus, which are on focusing on hope and survival, also includes the stories of people who did not make it, who didn't live with us to tell us what really happened. But it's the people who carry these stories and who get to tell the stories, and they tell everybody's stories. I think the stories of people who experienced it and survived. So I let this poem speak instead of me trying to frame it too much. This is called The Man Who Loved to Plant Water Spinach. The man who told us to plant water spinach to stop the river came from far away. He wore brown leather shoes, check shirts, torn blue jeans, and no hat in the breezy summer of the river island. The sound of bell metal and devotional songs welcomed him. Women admired the blue veins on his neck, gifted him cotton gamusas, hoping he would pluck orchids for them, but he was just interested in the river, in planting water spinach. Old women who had lost their gold and husbands in floods, children orphaned by waves, and Muslims who had to throw their loved ones into the river since there was no place to bury the dead, embraced him as one of their own, started loving him more than those men who carried guns, stopped the production of local liquor, punished roadside Romeos by making them hold their ears in public or smear soot from the bottom of large cauldrons on their faces. That's what the gun-loving moralist didn't like. Why was he interested in stopping the river? Why did he plant water spinach? They didn't believe that he wasn't an Indian spy. One dawn, they tied his hands and carried him away from the shrinking island he loved so much. When they pushed him, he transformed into a turtle that loved porridge and paddled into the unreachable parts of the river. Until noon, they searched. In a distant land he came from, his wife fed rice to crows. For months, there was no news of him. Years later, one of those young girls was orphaned by the river, met a large, old, wise turtle with torn jeans wrapped around its body. When they catch me, chop my limbs before I'm killed, the turtle said. Let the village feast on me. You plant my flippers in 4 different corners of the island, and I will protect it by covering it in the form of water spinach. I think whenever we write, we always dream of, and this is going to be the last poem, freedom. We want to be free from different kinds of shackles. And I was thinking about freedom after reading a few Assamese language poems. And this is an homage to Paul Eluard in France, who was a French poet, and Birinci Bhattacharya, an Assamese poem. Freedom. Freedom, we are still waiting to paint your name on the handlooms that weave red flowers into cream white silk, on the emerald meadows sprawled dreamily in the blue sky's embrace. Freedom, we are still waiting for that ship to arrive with your name inscribed on its mast. We still believe your name will be painted in cheerful blue on its sails, which will flutter in the air like the hair of a village girl. In February, when red flowers bloom like mischievous ideas in a child's mind. Freedom, we couldn't write your name on banana leaves with blue fountain pens, on grains of white rice in needle points, on the echo of our childhoods, on the fine surface of rice husk, on the transparent wings of dragonflies, on their pink, blue, green tails. Women couldn't melt you, shape you, study with gems to hang from their soft earlobes. Men couldn't wrap you in strips of newsprint like tobacco, like light one end, take a drag, recline dreamily against tree trunks on summer noons. Children couldn't peel you like ripe mangoes. No, you couldn't even be the walking stick of gray-haired ones or a drop of water on their tongue before the final breath. We couldn't usher you in. We couldn't make you sit on wooden dining tables, serve you an elaborate meal, though we waited so long with our doors ajar, clothes washed, verandas mopped with fragrant water, or with cow dung blended with white soil brought from the riverbanks. But here, on the wide banks of the Brahmaputra, you were defined everywhere on the ruddy rivers, where instead of fishes, chopped limbs stuck in the nets of fishermen, where fingers with and without nails were scooped up by a woman who went to wash dishes in the stream that ran beside her house. Often, freedom was written between the legs of women, left bleeding on the penises of men who only spewed white froth from their mouths, not information. Freedom, we are still waiting for your arrival. Until then, you'll be performed and explained, because ancient stories tell us definitions have always belonged to the definers. Thank you so much for listening to me. That's all.
Thank you so much, Aruni. Thank you. I want to let everyone know, of course, as well, that a link to Aruni's website is in the chat. To his most recent book, There Is No Good Time for Bad News. So I want to thank you once again for your reading. Our next reader today is poet Cynthia Dewi Oka, who is the author of Fire Is Not a Country, forthcoming in this fall of this year from Northwestern University Press. Also the book Salvage Poems from 2017, and Nomad of Salt and Hard Water from 2016. The recipient of the Tupelo Quarterly Poetry Prize and the Leeway Transformation Award, Her writing has appeared in the Atlantic, Poetry, Academy of American Poets, The Rumpus, Guernica, and elsewhere. She has taught creative writing at Bryn Mawr College and is a 2021-2022 Amy Clampett resident. She is the creator of Sanctuary, a migrant poetry workshop for immigrant poets based in Philadelphia, and is originally from Bali, Indonesia. So without further ado, over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Brooklyn Rail. Rajiv, thanks so much for the invitation. I'm so excited. And Aruni, those were really incredible poems. Thank you. They're ringing in my heart. And I can't wait to hear Desiree read too, and Rajiv. Manifest. The migrant feminist will not show you all her faces. The migrant feminist thinks in generations. In this sense, death is necessarily a comma. The migrant feminist washes, feeds, builds, plucks, sets ablaze, digs, flays, rips, dries, paints, kneads, wipes, testifies, lies, brays, stabs, crawls, lubricates, trims, guts, slaps, mantles, dams, disturbs. The migrant feminist hears cicadas and mistakes them for a theory of what comes and goes, for waking. The migrant feminist is unattached to ancestors and their judgments like spoiled fruit. The migrant feminist rewrites passive sentences in the night, revealing subject, predicate, object, while the baby sucks on her. The migrant feminist weeps at the stupidest things. A boy in the food court, his plate of spaghetti splattered on the ground. The father is yelling and yelling. The boy's whole being is hunger. The migrant feminist laughs. The migrant feminist practices a different faith for every language she speaks. English, the mother of order. Bahasa, the eternity of boats. The migrant feminist forgives ruthlessly. The migrant feminist makes not being a hero work. The migrant feminist is a kite in the wind and the wind. The migrant feminist studies other people's histories of themselves because what one cannot have, one cherishes. The migrant feminist makes no claims on land. The migrant feminist makes love to hyperbole. The migrant feminist is a simultaneity of swirling things and electrified wire. Therefore, a passion for windows, an interrogative stance toward bolt cutters. The migrant feminist chooses whom she belongs to. Ghosts light up her life. Thank you. This next poem was inspired by, I was an organizer that was like my full-time job for many years in various social movements. And like something that always actually I struggled with was how frequently combat liberalism by Mao Zedong was like used in political education. So this is an erasure of that text actually. Erasure of combat liberalism by Mao Zedong, whose great leap forward killed 45 million people because for some reason, certain revolutionary circles continue to use it as training material and even more inexplicably for conflict resolution. We stand for active ideological weapon. This weapon stands for itself, for the sake of refrain, to keep on good terms the organization and indulge the organization. The principles of collective life drift to avoid blame, to discipline arguments for the sake of unity or progress or the report. To be prop, to forget that one is an ordinary someone without a definite plan or direction, tolling the bell. Oneself, oneself, make no attempt, oneself. We are the principal mind, the compact tendency, stems of the abstract people, a manifestation of fundamental preservation. We must use spirit, mind, life, always and everywhere adhere to tireless struggle against the other self, the nest shown by certain people, the ask. For my father who once rubbed shoe polish over his bald head, she said not to say anything because it gave you hope, which reminds me here is the world you cannot enter. Though you brought us against the wishes of the bougainvillea, grown in clay pots arranged like soldiers between your daughters and the wrought iron gate on the other side of which dogs unleashed licked themselves to sleep. I envy sometimes these days their mud-hardened coats, shaved as I am to a worry over my shrinking Antarctic of time. No, it's not even that. The poem I should have written by now, I mean. What was sliding around inside you all those years. My painted face speaking English as though it never knew another purpose, while you knelt beside a creaseless bed, a man reduced to nothing but hours. Oh, you kept yourself busy, cooking, cleaning, washing, sewing, tying my mother's shoelaces on the steps of the bus. But purpose, that is a word for everything we have not yet found the strength to cast away. It must have been terrifying, your child, her thin wave through the fluorescent walls of a McDonald's on the first shift of her first job. You waited and waited for me to come back, for anyone to say, you are not done yet. And while you waited, other things happened. Eggs spoiled, mirrors rusted. A child thought herself a dog and the rain clapped. I don't to this day question your version of events. When your grandson was little, my body attacked the hair on my head. It fell in fistfuls until I was half lunar. I felt close to understanding then why you did what you did. He is 16 now and refusing to cut his. All night I hear him talk with no one I can see in a world I cannot enter. He is not worrying about getting a job. He doesn't say, leave me be. Clamps headphones over the black grass, just like I once did in my greasy uniform, not recognizing you, then not holding my laughter. Pa, it wasn't that you hurt me. You did. It was that you tried and kept trying to do what you thought a father should. So that gripping the wheel with both hands, you picked me up that night. The moon was more touchable than any country. For my first shift at my first job, like a man who hasn't been shedding himself in the dark. So that right then, looking away from you, my whole world was smooth. Not a single blade survived. Thank you. This last poem is a very new one. I wrote it just since in the past few weeks since I arrived at this residency. Thank you so much for making space for me today. First poem after parting. This is what I wanted, isn't it? This house, quiet as sunlight, grass on the other side of these windows fading from gold to green like a woman taking off her makeup. I have waited and waited to hold my grief, tied her up in garbage bags under clothes I intend to donate, slipped her in the side pockets of suitcases and empty slots between cigarettes and packs I carry always in multiples. I trained her to stand behind doors, to exit as laughter from my throat. Waved her at all the protests where I hoped she would slip out of my fist like a red banner printed with the many names of justice. And yes, I have more than survived this way, not noticing how she grew and grew, the way my body pinned to the aisle seat in coach is suddenly a roar pointing at the clouds. Dear God, I want to be made of more than this. Monstrous, he called me the night before he left, though first he checked the fridge, then the pantry, to make sure they were stocked with everything I had no excuse not to eat. This man who made my child his own. While he packed, I wiped the counters, the spines of poets lining the walls of the attic, office, kitchen, the porcelain surfaces of all traces of him. I did what I couldn't that night. The leaves were dark with hurricane years ago, thousands of miles away from anyone else I knew, with nothing to my name, having left the second country of my childhood, where T was devoured by the dragon on his back, and P and C and C and J and H are buried alongside my childhood, grinning like knives under the evergreen. Go, he'd said, because words are the closest invention we have to the sun. They can make anything grow. I thought then of all the places that have made me go, how going is a kind of life too. Just yesterday, we marveled at mountains peeking their cheeks between pristine New England gables, as though asking to be kissed, as though we have not been their destroyers. My feet hurt from cheap new shoes, and he held my hand like a small yellow bird while we climbed over the chain guarding the shortcut through the field. Beloved, can you tell me what is the difference between grief and gratitude? Tell me, how does the sky go on and on? Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Cynthia. I want to note for everyone as well that Cynthia's forthcoming book, Fire is Not a Country, from Northwestern University Press, this November. There's a link in the chat, and to please check that out. Thank you again, Cynthia. I am now going to hand the mic back over to Rajiv and let everyone know that we are so thrilled to have him today, and also to let you know that his newest book, Cutlish, is now available through 4-Way Books, which we will link in the chat. But Rajiv, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much again. And Aruni and Cynthia, that was just absolutely wonderful. What a joy it is to hear your poems this afternoon. And I can't wait to hear Desiree, who will close us out. I'm going to be reading from my new book, Cutlish. The first poem that I will read is the kind of spinal poem, or part of the spinal poem, in which my aji, or my paternal grandmother, tells the story of how my family arrived in the Western Hemisphere. Cutlish, I should also mention, is the rural Guyanese way of saying cutlass, which in the Caribbean is a machete. Cutlish, noun, 1. Cutlass, 2. British blade machete, 3. Colony blister of cane knife, 3. Demerara brown sugar, 5. Kidneys, toes, eyes, 6. 7. Eldorado rumrot. Bhagwati, my aji, opens a cream soda bottle with her teeth. She pours it into a glass and mixes it with tinned milk. Long time this whole place been a bush, all about. I be take a cutlish and clean 'em. Her orni slips from her head. Beta, mi aja come from India. When mi aja and aji left from Calcutta, to come to Guyana, mi aji been a pregnant. and my papa born in the ship. You know, long time you come in a boat named Jahaj. The same big ship will come from India. That is called Maki Jahaji. The people will come from the boat. This side K people, the English, the white man from this side say, Le abi go Guyana, or abi go Trinidad, or anywhere else that side. You know, you go get job and you go do good. And 1-2 years after, you go come back. A generation and a half later. I am playing with a form here that's based on an Trinidadian type of music and Surinamese, and it proliferates all across the Indian labor diaspora, and this is called the Chutney Song. These poems are developed from 2 songs by Sundar Popo, who was singing in the 70s from Trinidad. The first one is Scorpion Gal, and it goes, a scorpion sting me, I feeling I go dead. Darling, if you love me, come lie down in my bed. Tell me the number are you playing, me darling, when we go meet up again. And the second one is called Kaise Bani. And it goes, Kaise Bani, Kaise Bani, Kaise Bani, Kaise Bani, Pulari Bina Chutney, Kaise Bani. So these are the songs that I mine for their poetic structures. So one thing that you'll notice is that there's a chorus that will be in Guyanese Bhojpuri, my grandmother's language, and then it blends Creole, Guyanese Creolese, and English. So you'll hear the languages, and at the very end, I will translate the first couplet that you hear. And this is called the Poco Kid, as in the post-colonial kid. Matahat Logan bol na sake hai. Darasa nahi maran murjha. Let's get one thing queer. I'm no Sabu-like sidekick. I'm the main drag. Ram Ram in a sari, salam on the street. I don't speak Hindu, Paki, or Indian. Can't control minds. Have no psychic powers. I clip my yellow nails at dusk. On Saturday nights, I shave my head. Forgive me, Shiva. Forgive me, Saturn. I'm coolie on Liberty Avenue, Desi in Jackson Heights, where lights spell season's greetings to cover Christmas, Diwali, and Eid. Where white folks in ethnic aisles ask, will your parents arrange your bride? While Ma and I scope out fags, gaff and laugh while aunties thread our eyebrows. The subaltern cannot speak. Representation has not withered away. And you'll notice that chorus comes from Gayatri Spivak's essay by the same name, The Subaltern Cannot Speak, or Can the Subaltern Speak, excuse me. And this is the final realization of that. Let's see, the next poem that I'm going to read, I'm going to read another Chutney poem that is called Coolie. It's funny when you have too many of these, Post-its in your book, you get kind of lost with the ones that you've marked out. So Coolie. Coolie naam daharaya, jay humke tej pakadai, Cutlish jaisan kate humke, gainawa mein aike. With his whip scar iron shackle, neem, aja contract bong, whole day cut cane. Come night, he drink up rum fiso until he wind up and pitch in a trench black water and cry, oh manager, until sugar and pressure claim he too I. The background manager laugh we. So come, so done. I was born a crab dog devotee of the silent God, the jungle God, the God crosser of seas. White tongues licked the sweet demerara of my sores. Now, stateside, Americans erase my surf story. Call me Indian. Can't they hear Kalapani in my voice? My breath's marine layer when I say, they made us hold the name Coolie. Like a cutlass, it bit us, coming to Guyana. This next poem is called Hasa, And hasa, if you don't know, is a kind of fish in Guyana. We call it hasa. In Trinidad, they call it kaskadu. And it's a plated fish that lives in fresh water that people will eat. And the story goes, and the reason that I wanted to write about hasa is because you never see, you know, these literary poems with such folk foods in them. And this food has been so like important to me growing up, and my whole identity as being Guyanese in the United States. And also, you know, there's a story about my Aji who was widowed in her early 40s and left to take care of, you know, maybe 7 out of her 13 children and many grandchildren. And in Guyana, she would, the story is she would go fishing and not return home at night until she had enough fish to feed everybody. So this poem is called Hasa. And she couldn't, she was unlettered in any of her languages, so. Hasa. After Aja drowned and piranhas picked his body, Aji went to the trench with a stick and disturbed the fish's nest. So they leapt from the water straight into her basket. As she sucked her teeth and laughed to herself, Ego eats sweet, but I live seas away. So Ma freezes her pan for me after blood of lung and gas bladder spread red across her butcher block, an attempt to recreate Aji's specialty. Ma knows exactly where on the belly between the head and plates to insert her ceramic knife, to cut down and to push her fingers into the macabre cavity and rip from the meat, gall, pancreas, the Miocene lung-type vessels, and Ma's heart chamber opened, despite its rusted latch. She still plays Anuradha Padwal's Cham 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 Ke Chandani in the trench of this Floridian kitchen, where I slip my fingernail underneath one plate, close to the base of the tail, and pull it forward, so all the non-scales stack, exposing orange flesh. I look for the egg sac, whitish and curry, but find instead in the Hasa's mouth a silver coin sparkle, like 4 drachma in the canal to pay the temple tax. But the real miracle Aji clung to, a secret Ma knows also, is this catfish called hasar. Before in Guyanese we dropped the R to hasa. Stewed with pumpkin in Hindustani means laugh. That Aji and Ma have been laughing this whole time. That this laughing fish is the avatar of the shekel parable. That Aji and Ma, like disciples of survival, without knowing where, threw lines in the lake and trusted enough to live without men in their nests. The last poem that I'll read for you is called Guide, and it's based off of a film by the same name, starring Wahidur Rahman and Devanand. And so part of it is this man comes back to his home after being exiled for quite some time, and he's wondering how he can affect change in the world. Thank you, Aruni. And this is called Guide. And in the desert, if I say Ram or Rahim, will the clouds break into a steady drum? If sky cracks, I will sing for you, stamp my feet into ribbon. What if I said, even in the night, where your hair's perfume torments, I am still parched. There are no lowly births. Clouds too begin first as sea. Would you believe that I could leave the world, drawn up by the sun as a saint, me, a sham of a man? I watched you dance like a cobra. What does it take to be so bewitched by spirit? I spend the dark with whiskey, making a mask of withered roses. How quickly a shadow can pass and you become a stranger. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rajiv. That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us today. And again, we'll remind everyone that Cutlish is now available, and there is a link in the chat. Last and certainly not least, our reader of today is writer and poet Desiree C Bailey, who's the author of What Noise Against the Cane, just published this year, and winner of the 2020 Yale Series of Younger Poets Prize. What Noise Against the Cane was also just recently longlisted as a 2021 National Book Award. So congratulations, Desiree. She's also the author of the fiction chapbook In Dirt or Saltwater from 2016, and has short stories and poems published in the Best American Poetry, American Short Fiction, Callaloo, the Academy of American Poets, and elsewhere. She has received fellowships from the Norman Mailer Center, Kimbilio Fiction, Callaloo Creative Writing Workshop, Poets House, among many others. She has received awards from the New York State Council on the Arts and Poets and Writers. Desiree is from Trinidad and Tobago and Queens, New York, and I believe is currently in Providence. But without further ado, Desiree, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nick. Rajiv, thank you for inviting me here. I mean, I feel like my emotions are just sitting on my skin. I'm feeling everything right now. Cynthia, your work, it was so incredible to hear you read, and Aruni as well, who's no longer here. I mean, it was amazing to hear Aruni as well. I'm going to read from What Noise Against the Cane, and because Rajiv, you mentioned the C voice that runs along the bottom margins of the text, I thought, why not start there with this sort of tribute to the ocean, to the sea, and to the spirits of the ocean. Crow does fly high, but when he come down, ants does eat out the eye. And the breeze keep on blowing like she never even know crow name. And the ants love meat when it's sweetened by a great fall. Hear how the rain make music in the bones. Hear how she drum on the remains before washing it into my wide, wet mouth, my body spread out, squeezing the coast like a jammet. Yes, I's a jammet, I'm a chin up high, drink and be cunt drunk, drink and drown, sinking down in my boneyard. You have to come correct when it comes to me. You have to touch me, praise me, treat me like a queen. So bring the dark white roses, white wine and honey. Sweeten up my pum-pum, make my belly feel good. I here doing me flowing how others always flow. But everybody does do what they want with me. Say that I via Mayan, Mizuchi, and how Venus shell out herself from me. Say my body is all kind of king and beast. Even Miss Ting, Miss Poet, who thinks she writing me here, give me this voice like a voice that she afraid to forget. Syntax cut up and ring up a shadow Benny and Congo pepper. So I go take the voice and make it sing, make it roar like I hit in the peak of my pleasure. But oh God, that child is worried. That poet does ton and ton, she mind worse than a wave. The next poem is called La Divina Pastora, Mother of Miracles. And I'm thinking, so this poem is based off of a statue of the Virgin Mary in a town called Siparia, which is near where I'm from in Trinidad. And I suspect what I love about this statue of the Virgin Mary is that it's a Black Virgin Mary. And it's also a figure and a church that both Hindus and Catholics revere. And so I'm meditating on that here. We cast down our burdens at the feet of the Black Mother, us of myriad stripes, Hindu and Catholic, junctioned by her body here in the southwest of Trinidad. La Divina Pastora, of disputed origin, like all women blessed, or caught in the latitudes of conquest and myth. Once a girl who grew to a woman before nightfall, once a statue sprung from soil of cacao, patron saint of Siparia, gowned in white and gold, bestowing us with sights or husbands or whatever we ask day in and out, sweaty pilgrims with our hard-won nuts, our battered backs, our tears and haberdashery. Madonna Murty speaks to me through her burglar-proof glass, and in the creep of memory, I lock the bedroom door against the handyman's routine gaze. I shield my pubescent body. She too, mother of miracles with her own memories, coin offerings pocketed, rosary snatched, crown rushed to pawn shop, dress hem sullied by the traffic of hands. She too trapped in protection, caged against the muck, the world's leaking desires. We ask and she gives. We wrong her and she lets us cry out her many names. Divine shepherdess, Suparimai, Black virgin who once roamed banana leaves and blooms of Tulsi. We gather in procession down Kora Road on Good Friday. We bring our children to share their first hairs. We litter the altar with rice, jewelry, flowers, olive oil. We fill her cup to lip, think its flood climbs close to her worth, but by what measure, who's first? And the next poem that I'll read, I'm changing my mind at the last minute. I'm gonna read Woman in Dove, and so it's inspired by, partially by the song Chase the Devil by the Jamaican dub producer Lee Scratch Perry, who recently passed away, and also by Max Romeo. The devil I see is the one I saw and nail out of fears, out of cycles of wound, dread calcifying into prophecy. I put on an iron shirt to face it, chase it, but the cup still piss drunk with power. I put on an iron shirt, but the men on the street surveil the nipple. Been hounding my punani since before I spilled my first blood. What a menace of a body. I hurl blame to the husk. Is the devil real, or is it of my fantastical making? The answer is not the matter. The fact of paranoia be the true violence. Warfare, the very presence of the question. I want to peer inward, to take a good look at the sound system, my heartbeat echoing out of my folkloric thirst, my desperate belief in other realities, a B-side where I'm abolished from emotional labor, AKA Black woman's burden, free to surrender to my own madness, to sink down into the dub of it, stripped of my first voice, reverbing outside the pain of a body. Stripped of my first voice, down in the dub, cup hounds my blood into paranoia. A Black reality, cycle spilled, power husk, emotional woman, iron, real street folkloric and mad, true. Take a good look at the devil, peer into the dread. Men surrender to wound, drunk, calcified, but I fantastic, chasing echoes, nailed to system, free in sound. I a fact, answer of my own making. And the last poem that I'm going to read today is also the last poem of the book, and it's called Chant for the Waters and Dirt and Blade, Slight Return. A memory of the cemetery flooded with the murmur of the living, the candles, small fires, nesting on the graves. My grandfather and we, his thin-limbed offspring, every year in the humid dark, each All Saints' Day, the mosquitoes rising from the grasses to feed. Every year we light, we pray that our dead will not forget the chant below our skins. The scent of melting wax will always call forth the memory of our dead, the unheard footfalls, the bodiless rustling through the dasheen leaves. On this Hallows Eve, I am listening to the cars sounding their grievances on Flatbush Avenue while hemming words in my apartment, wishing that I could wake up tomorrow in my first country to visit what remains of my grandfather, to go to him, to the cemetery of his mother, his father, and the wax riding the damp air, its fragrance winding beyond the dark palm prints of a bacano tree. Who, what, how do I believe? My worship colonized, my gods painted in a foreign face, my grief song milked in the raised woods, shipped off, most wanted commodity. I stuff my ears against the old spirit's call, fearful of the way the past speaks to me. I cling to cold reason, but find empire's grasp, especially there. I believe in what makes me free. I believe in the red hot flowers crowning the head of the flamboyant tree. I believe in nutmeg ground down for cassava pone, and the hands, the firm singing hands that push its measurements through the decades. My goddess is the wave unsheathing, my name strung through the conch's contralto. Where will we live, I ask my ocean-torn love? Where will we raise our children if my fibroid womb will allow we of many soils, we who know the curse is the blessing is the curse, we of many and no homes, we who destroy and build, who send our love haunts along the currents. Whether quick clapping of hands or hymns of lands and mercy, or fistful of cowrie thrown across a mat, or psalms to tread the lion and the cobra, or symbols drawn in cornmeal, guarded throughout the brutal passage. I fear that I will never be fully at home, that the very first leaving cracked the skull of my belonging, that when I eventually stop moving, I won't understand the land's grieved tongue. I brown the sugar in the heavy bottom pot to fill up every space, to remind myself of language. I belong to the foam that singes the sand, where I was thrown to the waves just weeks into the world, my eyes widening to limestone cliffs, to see almonds ripening upon the shore. My hands are the scarlet ibises soaring the salt-washed dawn, cleaving the sky open like a blade. Thank you.
Wow, snaps and claps. Thank you so much, Desiree. That was incredible. Before we all head out, Rajiv, I just want to pass the mic over to you once more. I don't know if you have any closing remarks or anything to share with us, but yeah, passing the mic over to you.
Great. Yeah. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Brooklyn Rail and to you for organizing this and getting us all together. And thank you to Aruni, who had to leave early, to Cynthia as well as Desiree. Y'all are amazing poets, and I am so honored to be reading here with you. Thank you for saying yes. And also, to the audience, thank you for being here. And I hope that you also are sharing in my enthusiasm for the kind of transformation that these poems do to me. Hopefully they do perform this similar kind of magic inside of you. So thank you all so much for being here.
Likewise, extending that gratitude here from the Rail. Thank you, Aruni, Cynthia, Rajiv, and Desiree for joining us today. I encourage everyone to check out the links in the chat, support your local poets, buy their books. Congratulations to you all. And as always, we will share this recording in our YouTube archives, and it will also be available on the event site in just a day or so. We are here every day at 1 p.m. So join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with the Al Held Foundation and the River Valley Arts Collective, featuring Held Foundation Director Daniel Belasco, River Valley Arts Collective founder Allison Baker, curator Olga Decalo, and artist Gabriela Salazar, joined by Rail Artonic editor Jessica Holmes. We will conclude with a poetry reading from Rail poetry editor Anselm Berrigan's new book, Pregrets. So join us if you can. And once more, I just want to say what an honor and a sincere joy it has been to share this space with you all today. So
I'm joining to
welcome. Hey, Fong.
Rajiv, thank you so much for the beautiful curation. Cynthia, beautiful reading. Likewise, Desiree, I think Aruni might have left already, but this reading, I was sort of making my portraits. I always do that in the last few days for the rail before it get put to bed super soon. But it just so beautiful hearing you guys reading. It just reminded me the function of the poet is that they are shameless, so shameless with their experiences, in that they exploit them. And that's what you guys did. You exploit your experiences with such beautiful meter rhythm that rhymes your own cultural heritage with such reverie. And it just, to me, that just terrific. It nurtured me so much right now. I can go till 3 a.m. easily. So thank you, you guys. Desiree, Grasimile, Cynthia, for sure. Be in touch also. And a great honor and seeing you guys read just today. Rajiv, Grasimile. Back to you, Nikki.
Thank you, Phong. And yeah, I'm just also just nourished and grateful for all of you for joining us today. So I bid you farewell and thank you again. Thank you all.
Phong, I saw your face at Mass Mocha just a couple weeks ago. It was a portrait of you. There was like this wall of portraits that an artist had put together.
Oh, yes.
It was such a nice surprise. I was like, hey, it's Phong.
Well, so far, no one put me back on the boat. The labor camp Vietnam, Cynthia, we're still very subversive, but there's certain freedom that we don't want to take for granted here.
Right.
So, we embrace both freedom and oppression. We tread the line because, as you know, there's no way that we can do what we do in our respective countries.
That's right.
This is a very complex place, but let's just try to exercise and exploit the best tradition.
That's right.
Of this country, which is Walt Whitman idea of democratic vistas.
Yeah.
Emerson, and go further back. And I think that together our community can do it, you guys.
Yep.
We can do it.
We can.
And poetry, poets.
Yes.
in the rare orbit for sure. So yeah, be in touch and let's just use our works as arsenal against any demagogues, technology and speed.
That's
and
right.
destroy language. No reduction in language. We expand the complexity and the beauty and the subtlety of our language. Thank you, you guys.
Thank you.
all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much and congrats.
Congrats. We're gonna make sure we get all the books, okay? See you super soon.